Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry J. Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. We're still recording during a war, this war, Israel, Iran, Israel, Hezbollah, and I know that many people who watch us and listen to us in Israel have to move in and out of shelters. We are with you. We are thinking of you. And we are in solidarity, only praying for your protection, that God protects you. Hineno yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. I've started saying that again. We said it every day, twice a day from October 7th, and then, held it in abeyance for a while and then brought it back. I think it's going to be part of the regular. We love that psalm altogether.
Great song. Great
And
song.
it's
But
true.
but you gotta say, buddy, you gotta
Oh
say
yes,
Israel is even more. We care even more about Israel today because there's been a new baby born in Tel Aviv.
we are proud to announce the birth a new granddaughter. She's a
So,
little beautiful baby.
So you got three granddaughters.
Three granddaughters. She was
a good
born
day for the
today,
Jews.
and she is just she's beautiful. And
Mazal tov to
Nama,
Naama and
Nama,
what's her husband's name?
Jacob,
Yaakov.
Jacob
Well,
Zucker,
we can relate.
and this is a beautiful baby. And when I got the message today, I was just overwhelmed with joy.
She should grow up in a land of peace and a world of
Amen,
peace.
amen, amen, amen. We are devoting this Parsha talk to Seder talk. Not that we don't want to talk about Parsha Tzav. We do, but
We've already said too much.
we're gonna we're gonna put that in abeyance, uh, and we're gonna talk about
Parshat Tzav. I just
we're
say the
gonna talk
following.
about things in the Seder. I think that they will be useful for our three listeners, viewers. We have more than that, actually.
Okay, can I just say two things about
Go
Parshat
ahead.
Tzav? First of all, Parshat Tzav does have one of the best lines in the Torah. Eish tamid tukar ala mizbeach lo
Nice.
You got to burn a perpetual fire and never let the fire go out. Great pasuk, great verse. And Parshat Tzav for our Hebrew, for less, facile with Hebrew, Parshat Tzav is spelled Tzadik Vav. Before we started recording, we were talking and we mentioned the late Rabbi Neil Gilman, who was a member of my shul, and and he related the story that Tzav, which is spelled Tzadik Vav, just two letters, that a rabbinical student was coming for an interview, and as is the custom, the rabbinical student had to give a Dvar Torah, and he began by talking about this week's parsha is Tzu.
Two.
Ouch!
Did he get accepted? That's what I want to
At
Ouch!
know.
I think
HOC.
probably not. I think
Oh, okay. So we're gonna do a kind of round robin here. Ask for different pieces of the Haggadah or different things that you want to focus on uh, as we are preparing for Pesach. We're not only preparing our homes and menus, but we're also preparing our minds, our souls. Some of us are going to be leading seders, and I used to give workshops on how to lead a seder, and they were a lot of fun. And we could all use some new material or some old material with new voices. So, Rabbi Barry Chester, I'm going to start off with you. What do you want to talk about?
So, one of the passages that I think is should be prominent this year is near the beginning of the Magid. Vehisha amda lavotenu v'lanu shelo achad bilvad amar aleinu l'chalotenu ela shebachol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu v'hakadosh baruch hu matzilenu miadam. That God has been with us in every generation, even though people have risen up to destroy us. God has saved us from their hand. And Israel and the United States are both at war now, and it's a time for some kind of reflection. When are we truly at peace? And what should be our attitude towards our enemies, real and imagined? And what strikes me is that the drash that is now introduced is Sei Lamad Ma Bikesh Laban Ha'arami Lasot Yaakov Avinu. That the first time the Jewish people have, according to this passage, were put in danger was by Laban, the father-in-law and uncle of Yaakov. Sheparo lo gazar ela ala zorachim Zacharim, Laban bikesh lakor et hakol. That Paro only was concerned with eliminating the males, but Laban wanted to uproot everything. And one of the things that struck me over the years is what really was Laban's issue. He wanted Yaakov and his two daughters and their handmaidens and his grandchildren to stay with him. And there never would have been a Jewish people had we assimilated into the world of Aram. That Laban did not come to destroy us overtly, but perhaps covertly. That there's a lesson here about boundaries, and that sometimes we need to recognize who our enemies are to help us discover who we are.
I mean, when you talk
What's
about
the
that,
briefing?
again, our conversation goes from. I always like to use this image of, you have a split screen. You're talking about the past, but you're talking about the present also. We tend to do that a lot. And here's a text that you're saying applies to us. The Vishamda text certainly applies to us today, and the Arami Oved Avi text, Ma Bikesh Lavan Arami. It's seeing your limits and seeing the limits of your people and seeing where it is you are aggressed, I guess, or if that's a verb. I mean, who the aggressors are and what kind of aggressions they're making on you. Yeah. And it takes us back into this story. I mean, I think part of the goal of the Haggadah there is it wants to get you back into your origins there. I don't know if you have any.
Well, but it also raises a fundamental question: where did we begin?
Yeah.
And we have more than one answer in the Haggadah. We have the answer of Yaakov and Abraham and Joshua. They're all different ways of seeing the story, and depending on where we think we began, will affect how we understand our journey.
So on today's date, Barry, where do you think we began? If
Well,
you were to
since I'm looking at this passage in the Haggadah, I'll go to Yaakov, because what distinguished Yaakov from the earlier patriarchs is all of his children became part of the people. One of the things I think we sometimes don't pay enough attention to is there must have been a great deal of heartache for both Abraham and Yitzchak, knowing that half in the case of Yitzchak and 87% in the case of Abraham of their children were not part of the people. They were excluded from the covenant. It's only when we get to Yaakov, and with Yaakov, ironically, it doesn't matter who the mothers are, to our handmaidens, to our wives, all their children are going to be part of the covenant.
Interesting.
And that is, I think, the beginning for me of our national story.
I want so badly to go back to Abraham, and
Well, don't.
No, but I want to go back as Abraham as the beginning because he there's the beginning starts with a kind of recognition or discovery of God, and the Haggadah picks on that by quoting the passage from Joshua.
Well, that's right, because that's right, because with that is the debate not only about what's freedom, but what is enslavement. Is it, as the Hasidim say, ikar hagalut higalut min hadat. It's like the real exile is exile out of consciousness, and Abraham. That's why Abraham is the originator, because he breaks the idols and he leaves a certain world to a new covenantal world. And so, yeah, we got to start there. But Yaakov is also we we for the most part don't tend to refer to ourselves as Bnei Abraham. We tend to refer to Bnei Israel or Bnei Yaakov, and that's very defining.
So if
So
I
what I
may,
would add
go ahead.
is just that phrase, Arameo Veda V, three different answers to what it means. My father was a wandering Aramean. So for the rabbis, that seems to refer to Yaakov, although some say it actually refers to Abraham, because Abraham came from Aram in this reading, and God caused him to wander by sending him to the land of Canaan. But the Haggadah reads Arameo Veda V as Lavan wanted to kill my father, which is a very
So this is
you know, forced reading.
what we've discovered here is this is a good line of conversation for a seder, for a short discussion, which is I like the question, where does your story begin, and how the Haggadah answers that question, and there are many answers within the Haggadah, or there are many answers within Judaism as to where your story begins, and many of us would come to that question with from different places. You know, Abraham, I came. You said Yaakov. Some would say, you know, I'm Bnei Israel. Egypt is where your story as a nation begins. Exodus is where your story as a nation. And some would say, you know, our nation begins already in the entry of Israel into the land. Okay, so good vort there. Rabbi Jeremy Kamenovsky, pick your passage of the Seder or pick
No,
a topic.
there's four questions. Everybody knows the four questions, and there's really a fifth question. The fifth question is posed at most seders, which is, of course,
And do we eat?
when do we eat? When do we eat? You know, we were we were thinking. My son-in-law is a relatively new addition to the Jewish people, and we were thinking about inviting his parents to the seder, and we decided against it only because not that we didn't want to have that we didn't want to have Mark and Chris. They're wonderful, but we thought we cannot invite you to come to dinner at 8 o'clock, and then we're going to sit for 3 hours, and then we're going to give you soup at 11 o'clock. That's just not
Fair,
fair.
not fair.
So, uh, but one of the things that I really like about the Haggadah is the statement of Rabban Gamliel, Kol shelo amar shlosha dvarim lo yatsa yedei chova. Anyone who didn't describe three foods has not fulfilled their obligation. Now, you'll note that he doesn't say those who don't eat three foods. He says who don't describe three foods and who don't explain three foods. And maybe this passage is even old enough that it dates from a time when people were still offering the Korban Pesach, the ritual sacrifice on pilgrimage. At least its roots may have been there. But it's the symbolic power of the food. It's not just the menu. It's that the menu of the Seder is supposed to tell a story. And so you have, now let me call up the thing here on my page. You have Koslo Dvarim, Lo Yatzai Dechovato, Elu Pesach Matzah Maror. You have to expound the meaning of the lamb sacrifice. You have to expound the meaning of the unleavened bread, and you have to expound the meaning of the bitter herbs. And one of the things that I really find so interesting about this is that you explain each of them with biblical quotations, but it is evident from the Bible quotations that in Bible times, they were symbolic foods whose very existence, whose very presence at the meal was supposed to tell a story. So the Passover sacrifice, for example, let me scoot back here to Exodus chapter 12, verse 27. Which is the biblical Kitavo el Aretz Asher Yiten Adonai Lachem Ka'asher Diber. God will bring you to the land as promised. Ushmartem ta'avodah hazot, and you shall perform this rite. V'haya ki yomru aleichem b'nechem, and your children will ask you something. Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. What does this ritual mean to you? And of course, in our Seder, that has been associated with a nasty little dig by the wicked child who says, what does this mean to you? It means nothing to me. But that's totally absent from the biblical text. The biblical text treats that as a serious, important question. I would add that it's one of my favorite verses because Maha avodah hazot lachem, what does this ritual mean to you? Is, I think, something that every Jew should ask every day. It doesn't make you wicked to ask such a question. It makes you inquisitive and spiritually open. So the child asks, what does this mean to you? And you say, Ve'amartem zevach pesach hu ladunai. And you say, the Bible even describes the hypothetical child and the hypothetical parent. You say, this is the lamb sacrifice, to God, Asher Pasach al Batei Bnei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim, who protected or passed over or skipped over or something like that over our houses. And when you have this food on your table, it tells you about protection. And then similarly, what's with the matzah? Well, God deemed us like that. There wasn't even time for the dough to rise. It was less than 18 minutes. And that's how promptly God ushered us out of slavery into freedom. And then there's the bitter herbs. And to me, it's just like, we're talking, and Elliot has plenty of wise things to say about the different modes of storytelling, the different singing or expounding or repeating, or the different, conveying information or conveying ideas. All this is true. And one of it is the symbolic power of the meal.
Exactly, and that's called the object lesson, which is showing a prop, and you quoted me last week by saying that the most important symbol of the Seder is you, and I agree. But you're not only pointing to the different things, matzah maror, Pesach matzah maror, which function as these props, but you have wine, you have three matzot, and they're configured in a certain way to tell a narrative, halachic narrative of how one breaks this bread on Pesach, and of course the Seder plate writ large, which consists of those three plus a few other things. These are the main symbols on the at the table. In addition to other things that you may want to bring, I think that people can get very creative in bringing things to the table. What would you, it's like, Capital One, what do you have in your wallet? It's what do you have on your table, on your Seder plate?
You have
And,
an orange?
you know,
Everybody
yeah,
nowadays, they've got some added thing. This year you have to have a tomato, or this year you have to have an orange, or this year you have to have a padlock. And I'm not against those things, but I'm kind of against those things.
Okay. I wanted
but,
to add something though to what
yeah,
Jeremy said, and that these three special foods of Pesach that Rabban Gamliel taught us about were not foods that were only eaten on Pesach. It's only the night of the Seder, though, that they acquire the significance of this particular story,
yeah,
right? We can't think that, matzah was one of the breads that people ate in the ancient world. Maror was a condiment. Lamb was a staple meat in the Middle East, as it's been for thousands of years. But on Pesach, these were vehicles of a particular story. And when we eat the foods, we're digesting the story.
all right. I want to turn to me. I have a few things I
Okay,
want to
let's
talk
turn to
about.
you.
Elliot,
Elliot,
please.
what would
So
you
so
bring?
I have a bunch of things to talk about, but it just so happens, like we all have our collections of Haggadot, and just before I went to the shelf, and I think what I think I'd like to do, and I would encourage viewers, listeners to do, is have as many different Haggadot at the table as possible. Have one standard Haggadah and maybe others Haggadah, because each Haggadah tells a story of itself. This is my Zaydi's Haggadah, my grandfather's Haggadah. It's beautiful. My grandmother bought it on one of her trips. There's a certain pedigree to this thing, but look at the stains here, and look at all the things and the pictures. It's an Israeli Haggadah. It was from the 70s or whatever. It's the illustrations by A. Alweil. I have no idea who that is. Okay. We have this Haggadah, of course, which is very familiar to us, the Feast of Freedom, put out by the Rabbinical Assembly. There are amazing stories behind these Haggadot. This Haggadah was commissioned in a time when we when we understood that we needed a Haggadah. And of course, I'd like to point out the beautiful illustration, the four children, and this is there's one of the children in each of us. This was the illustrator was Dan Reisinger, an Israeli artist. Here is a favorite. Oh my God, you'll
Oh, I
know this.
love the Zik
The
Haggadah.
Zik
It's the best.
Haggadah, Zik Haggadah, and he's got some amazing, illustrations here that themselves, in Noam Sion's Haggadah, he has different the whole outlay of all the different illustrations, and you can see that in that illustration alone, there's the dialogue going on between all of the different sons. It's just remarkable. This is a JPS Haggadah. It's a Tabori Haggadah, nice scholarly Haggadah. I have a couple of other ones here, but I want to turn to some real familiar stalwarts, okay? And I really want to think about them. For example, this one,
Rabbi
okay,
Maxwell House.
Rabbi
It's
Maxwell
from
House,
Moshe Sinai.
okay, and this one, and the little essay that I want to write about these is that I think there are a couple more that I would put in the canon of mid-century, early 20th century Haggadot. That would it be too outlandish to say that these Haggadot formed a certain kind of anchor to 20th century Jewish culture? Um, I don't want to go so far as to say revolutionized it, but
It caffeinated it in the
it,
case of the Maxwell
the
House.
Maxwell House, it's a fixture almost in everybody's home, and what the brilliance of this was marketing. I mean,
Right, but what made the Maxwell Haggadah so special, I think, is that it's really two Haggadahs.
in
There's
what
the
way?
traditional one in Hebrew, and then
Yeah,
there's the one in the back that's almost all in English. So no matter who you were, at least
it's
that's what
all
I
it's
remember
all
from.
translated. It's all side by side
But they
translated
had a more English, anglicized version. That's what I remember from growing up.
from
But the
growing
point I
up.
wanted to make is this: is that what all these different Haggadot teach us is that the story of the Exodus is at once both a national story and a personal story. And it's one that exists for us this year and one that we had a slightly different one in our past and God willing in our future as well. And that's really, I think, part of the narrative art here is that we have to tell our story.
So
I really
where
like that. I really like that image of what shaped
American Judaism.
American Judaism, and we're three conservative rabbis, and obviously, Orthodoxy was in the early part of the 20th century, kind of on its heels. The immigrants, in the main, wanted to be Jewish, and they wanted to keep their Jewishness and their connection to the past, but they didn't really want to be European. They wanted to Americanize. And then, of course, there was Reform Judaism too, which spoke to a slightly different demographic of German Jews who had come earlier, and then Jews who were took a less traditional route. But these books that you're describing, I mean, the Maxwell House is no great work of scholarship or literature or anything like that, but it was like a Haggadah and an American key that enabled these families, and a lot of them, a whole lot of them. Certainly, I grew up at the Maxwell House Haggadah to find, like, a way to do this as a regular old American.
That's a story, and that's what where I'm drawn to this is not only the nostalgia of it and the fact that you could probably go to the grocery store today and pick up one. They probably have an edition that's fairly recent. They know enough. They have enough marketing seichel to keep upgrading it and updating it, um, and making it popular because it's so connected to the brand. And that's a very complicated thing today because there's so many things that compete for your loyalty in the brand. I would say, I'm holding this up. I mean, every student in every religious school, in every day school, use this, and for a couple of good reasons. One, it's a basic text of the Haggadah. Two, it was accessible. Three, it was fairly cheap to buy. I mean, it cost
And
maybe
the
$2 a
lines
copy.
were numbered, as I
And the
recall.
lines were numbered, right? So in the passage, for example, that Jeremy you mentioned, right? So this is the Rabban Gamliel passage. So you have matzah shanu, matzah zo shanu
Al
ochlim,
Shuma.
al shuma. A little picture of matzah, very simple. And Nathan Goldberg. I'm going to find who Rabbi Nathan Goldberg was. This is based on a Haggadah by Rabbi Zev Harry Gutstein, or Z Harry Gutstein. Who was Rabbi Gutstein? And this was published by Tzav, Sharfstein. So you have to ask yourself, the function of these publishing houses, the Tzav publishing house, the Maxwell House, which was published by somebody, that before there was the Jewish publication, Jewish publications, that goes back a long time, but before there were lots and lots of publishers, these were the canonical texts. And here's where I want to go with this, which is that we have there. I get every year around I don't know, November, December. I get, what's it called now? It's used to be Haggadahs, not Haggadahs Are Us. It was there's a company.
I think it's called Haggadah
No,
Zorah.
Haggadahs, they published Noam Tzion's Haggadah. It's
From
called
Cleveland, I think.
Something
I just
Recustom. Recustom is a website that they will publish your own Haggadah, your family edition, right? With all the things that you will want to do. You go to recustom.org or .com, and you can make your own Haggadah. So it's like, to quote the book of Ecclesiastes, but paraphrase, of the making of Haggadahs there is no end. A making of books. Everybody has their own Haggadah. Everybody has their own stuff. And I have, tons of Haggadot, but I have files and files and boxes of material, over the years. Every year I publish a Jeopardy quiz for my shul, and I did one this year. And every year I have a certain kind of, question that I'm asking, about this year. We had the COVID years of Pesach. We started out that time. We had October 7th, and the years that we were anguishing about the hostages and just the pain of that. Last year, I remember, writing something about the difference between, not the difference, the comparison between Eli Sharabi and Eli Wiesel, and thinking, that was such a resonant story for us. It still is very much, but we've moved beyond the hostage story, and we are now in this war. And so, Avadim Ayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim, Avadim Ayinu, that those two words, we were slaves. And I hear the song, V'ata ata, we sing Avadim Ayinu Hayinu ata b'nei chorim, and that the composer of that song took the first two words, but he went in a different place with it. He started with these biblical words, these Haggadah words, we were once slaves, and now we're free. So my question is, Avadim Ayinu, we were slaves, finish the sentence, ... And if the sentence starts with, and now we are, so what would you be now? Avadim Ayinu, and now we are, so we are immersed in a war, or now we are bewildered by what is all this hostility towards the Jewish people, or and now we are, confounded with our sense of relationship with the world and our story. What is our story now? And that opens up the possibility of many discussions, of course, and what you could do at your Seder. What can you do at your Seder? Talk about...
What you're suggesting, Elliot, is that the Haggadah is an unfinished text.
It's a constantly evolving text. That what makes Passover in general so amazing, okay, to use a word that we use rarely on this podcast, is that it's a canonized text, but it's never finished.
Fluid.
It's fluid, and our Haggadah today comes down to us with this rich history. Just the three of us. We delve into this stuff, and we have the tools and the education to go deeply and to know how to research these things. We have a favorite of the three of us, the Rabbi Menachem Kasher Haggadah, or it's the Haggadah Shlema, right? It's such an impeccable work of scholarship that looks at the different sources. And Barry, hold up for us the Goldschmidt, right? You have so the Goldschmidt Haggadah. This is it's a Hebrew Haggadah. It's amazing in the sense that what he did was he took different manuscripts and he shows where that the Haggadah that we have is actually was one snapshot of one moment that got put into print. That there are tons of different customs and tons of different ways that you recite, for example, the passage before Elijah, or there are tons of different ways that you could talk about, enter into the Magid section. And what that tells us is that us, all of us, are
Each
part
of
of an
us.
ongoing conversation. We're adding to it, and all you need today you can do this with your printer. You can print up a Haggadah, which is where I'm. One last point, which is, look where we are with AI. You could easily get AI to produce a Haggadah for you. I mean, one of my congregants sent me a connection to that, and you could have the AI Haggadah, and that's great. You can do that, and of course we could have sermons done by AI, and who knows, we could
Don't
have
do
a
that.
podcast done by
Bad
AI
idea.
also.
Don't do that.
But this is real. This
But
is real.
I just asked Google Gemini a question,
Yes.
and I think that the answer will be nice and illustrative for us. I just asked AI, Google Gemini, is the Haggadah the most printed Jewish book? And it's a resounding yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So even though, even though whatever it's I didn't know that thing that you just said about the Haggadah that we have is a kind of a snapshot with much greater variety. It is true that in the prayer books, the printing press fixed the text because there was much greater variety before everyone was holding a book. But there have been something like at least 5,000 different printed editions of the Haggadah.
Yeah.
The first Haggadah was printed in 1482 in Spain. Not a good time to be a Jewish printer, a good location. But I mean, that's got to be when did we start having printed books? In the 1450s, right?
Around then, 1476.
1476. So within 10 years of printing, there's a Haggadah in Spain. There is the Prague Haggadah printed in the first illustrated one printed in 1582. We have what's the famous one with the illustrations of the bird's
Sarajevo?
The Bird's Head Haggadah.
Bird's Head Haggadah. These are not printed ones. That's manuscript.
Illustrated one, manuscript.
But obviously Jews didn't print that many Sidurim, but they printed that many Haggadot.
Right, but I think the reason is because when you're at a Seder, everyone needs a Haggadah. The only people that really need...
I think that's Maxwell House. I actually think that's Maxwell House. And then we were talking about that Zuggen
So you
style.
think it was more oral up until
Yes,
the...
100%,
definitely.
100%.
We were thinking about that. We were talking before we went on about that Zuggen style of going through the Haggadah where you kind of quickly daven through. Most people were illiterate. Most people didn't have books at all. Most people couldn't afford books at all. And I bet you that Maxwell House, and it would be interesting to know what the contemporary, 1955 or 1960 Israeli Haggadah was.
It probably goes with that melody of Vehi Shamda.
They're printed in the paper. They're printed. If you go to Israel this Shabbat, you'll get the Friday
and Mariv and Yediot used to get a Haggadah
with Haggadah in it for sure.
But what I want to say is that this part of the discussion leads one to conclude, perhaps, is that the secret to redemption is not in the fixed form, but in fluid forms. And that it's our openness at Pesach to this fluidity that truly makes it a holiday of redemption.
I like that idea. That's a good...
Beautiful comment. And that associates with another of the famous lines. Kol Adam, the Kol
Right.
Adam Tzav Lirot et Atzmo.
Oh, yeah.
Every person has to, each people have to see themselves as part of this story. And so there's a way in which that would goose the production of unique and different Haggadot.
Right, because Pesach, there are no outsiders. You have to be an insider to celebrate.
Well said.
Dane. Well, to all of the insiders who are watching and listening to us, we thank you. We are so honored that you are with us. And we are wishing you both a beautiful Shabbat and a beautiful Yontiv, beautiful Pesach. We won't be recording next week for obvious reasons. It's just going to be a bit busy in the early part of the week. So this will be our Pesach broadcast, and we will see you sometime the following week during Chol HaMoed. In the meantime, thank you all, and have a beautiful Shabbat, a beautiful Pesach.
We
Shabbat
wish you
shalom, chag sameach.
we wish the standard greeting is you wish people a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a holy and happy, a kosher and happy holiday. I've often thought it should be Chag Kasher O Sameach. It should be kosher or happy, but it can't be
I'd
both.
like to
That's the
say
folk reason.
have a meaningful, because once you say Chag Kasher, you give people so much anxiety.
All
All right.
right,
Be
guys.
well, everyone. See ya. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
All right.